Hey bees, I'm Marie from Humblebee and Me, and welcome to the last Q&A video of 2019, and in fact the last Q&A video of this decade. Just in case you're thinking something about me looks a little different and you're not quite sure what it is, I did dye my hair. It is quite a lot darker than it was, and quite a lot darker than I thought it was going to be. It is one of those 28 washout dyes. I went darker than they usually advise, so it'll probably last longer than that. But yeah, you can now start watching my hair fade in color over the next few months. I didn't do a Q&A video last month for November 2019 because there was simply far too much holiday making to get through, but we are back this month. So just a reminder, if you have a question you would like to see answered in one of these videos, feel free to leave it in the comments below or watch out for the monthly post I make on the Humblebee and Me Facebook page asking for questions for these videos. But without further ado, let's dive in. One of the questions I've been hearing a lot lately is, do you have a recipe or a formulation for X sort of project or that uses X ingredient? So there are over 1,000 posts and projects on humblebeeandme.com, so there's a decent chance that I do. But with so many posts, it can sometimes be overwhelming to try and find the thing you're looking for. If you are looking for a formulation featuring a specific ingredient, the easiest way to find formulations using that ingredient is to look up the ingredient in the Humblebee and Me encyclopedia. And at the bottom of every single entry in the encyclopedia, you will find links to the 8 most recent projects that use that ingredient. So that is a great place to start. You can also scroll to the very bottom of any page on humblebeeandme.com and look for the tag cloud that's in the footer there. It really just looks like a giant kind of clutter of ingredient names. If you click on any of those ingredient names, you'll be taken to a page that just has all the projects that I've tagged with that ingredient name, which basically means all the projects that use that ingredient. If you're looking for a certain type of project, kind of the first thing I would do is I would just search for it. Just type it into the search bar. There's one right in the main menu at the very top of the website, or if you go to humblebeeandme.com/search, whole page dedicated to searching. So that's a great place to start. If you know the category of the type of project you're looking for, go to the main menu and click on like the recipes link, and then there's a drop down and there's a bunch of categories, and then within those subcategories. So within, there's face, and then under face you'll find like lotions and serums and sort of so on and so forth. And under hair you'll find like shampoo and conditioner. And so there's tons and tons of different categories there. So if you're more so just looking to browse for sort of a conditioner recipe or something like that, that's the place to go. And if you are looking for simpler projects, I have a crunchy section and a chewy section. So crunchy formulations being ones that use really quite simple ingredients, and chewy formulations being ones that use mostly simple ingredients, but with 1 or 2 maybe more advanced things, so things like emulsifying waxes and solubilizers and preservatives. Joan wanted to know if I use a liquid or a bar shampoo, and if it is one that I have made myself. These days I'm using pretty much exclusively bar shampoos because I'm testing a ton of different bar shampoo formulations. You might recognize this, my pressed chocolate Rasuel shampoo bar. I still have quite a few of these from when I was developing the recipe and making the videos and the blog posts and stuff, so I'm definitely still using this one quite a lot. And then I'm also working on testing some new ones, so this is a Lush inspired one. The pink color might be a bit of a hint as to which one I'm channeling, and then playing with some more that contain things like herbs and botanicals. So yeah, lots and lots of shampoo bars, and all ones that I have made. Another question I've been hearing fairly frequently is, do I still use X product that I've made and shared and you can find on my website or here on YouTube? I would say the vast majority of the time the answer is no, and that usually has nothing to do with the formulation whatsoever and everything to do with the fact that I am a one-woman skincare product factory, and I create so many things that if I kept using a thing that I'd shared 4 years ago, I would not have room in my skincare routine and on my face to test new things to share with you later. If I share a certain type of formulation fairly frequently, so things like hand washes, lip balms, facial serums, that sort of thing, chances are, once you've seen it on the blog, I'm almost done with it at that point in time, because I will have been testing it and tweaking it and, just using it in kind of the run-up time as I'm developing the formulation. If it's something I don't share formulations for very often, especially things with long shelf lives and fairly low usage doses, there is a decent chance I'm still using it. So thinking back to some of the older formulations that I still use really regularly, my solid dishwashing paste, fabulous, but I've never shared anything else like that, or haven't since. So I'm still using that one. I still use my creamy lip tints a lot. I am wearing the cream foundation that I shared earlier this year in this video. Really long-lived things like the shampoo bars that we were talking about earlier and conditioner bars, those things tend to last for absolutely ages. So even if I have shared some new ones, there's a decent chance that there's still some little nubbins and niblets of some older ones still hanging out in my shower. And a lot of cream highlighters and cream blushes that I've shared in the last couple of years are also still in rotation. My Snowy Dawn highlighter is still one of my all-time favorites. I had a question about the difference between oil cleansers and surfactant cleansers. I think the biggest difference that you'll notice in the use of these products is that a surfactant-based cleanser is generally formulated to bubble and lather in use, whereas an oil cleanser isn't. When you mix an oil cleanser with water, it will become kind of milky, but it doesn't really bubble. Personally, I find that oil cleansers tend to be more gentle and also tend to be better at removing makeup, but this is a very broad generalization. Both cleansers will cleanse the skin, and both types of cleansers can be made to be stronger or gentler, kind of depending on your personal preferences. It's relatively common to also use both. A lot of sort of Asian skincare routines will recommend starting with an oil cleanser and then following up with a foaming cleanser for a double cleanse. What you use is totally up to you and personal preference. These days I have been using mostly oil cleansers and not doing the foaming cleanser, but then I kind of ran out of the oil cleanser I was using a couple days ago, and now I've been using just a foaming cleanser, and I've used them together, and I've used them kind of just one-offs, and it's just, yeah, all about what works for your skin. Meara wanted to know about the differences between a face lotion and a body lotion. Generally speaking, I'm pickier about face lotions, so when it comes to things like slip and skin feel and kind of how tacky or greasy a lotion or a cream is, I'm going to be much more concerned about those things in a face lotion than I might be in a foot lotion. I'm also a lot more willing to put expensive ingredients and actives into a face lotion than I would in a body lotion. When it comes to scent, I like to keep facial products lower scent than a body product. Large part of that, of course, is that it's just so close to your nose, but also face skin can definitely tend to be more sensitive than the skin on the rest of the body. And as a continuation on that, there are some essential oils, like say peppermint essential oil or menthol, that are really nice in a body lotion or a foot lotion, but I would really not recommend putting in a face lotion. In the case of peppermint especially, you'll just kind of have like running eyes and nose, and that's just generally, very unpleasant, and I have never once had anybody request a face lotion formulation from me that makes their nose run, so I don't think it's a great selling point. So yeah. For me, those are the really big differentiators between a face lotion and a body lotion, but sort of beyond the, not making yourself cry or really irritating your skin, not doing anything outright unpleasant. There's not a lot of really hard and fast rules. I've definitely purchased hand creams from La Roche-Posay on my face, and they've worked beautifully. And our last question is from Heather, and it's a really good and kind of long one, so I'm going to throw it up on the screen for you. Heather asks, I've noticed that the more you learn about chemistry, the more your ingredient list resembles a package from the store. I similarly started out making everything natural, then as I learned more about chemistry, I got further and further away from that notion. I suspect you're much further along in this process than I am. Are there any chemicals in typical soaps or lotions that you still wouldn't use, other than fragrance oils? So Heather is bang on with her observations. I definitely, when I first got started, really was focused on things being very crunchy, and I have moved away from that sort of fairly gradually over the last 8 years. I'm not sure if this is a complete list, but I did brainstorm up a list of things that I generally don't use or still don't use, and some of the reasons why. So the first one is SLS, or sodium lauryl sulfate. Couple reasons. One, I've never really actually found it for sale in reasonable quantities to home crafters in Canada, so haven't really had the opportunity to work with it, but I also find that I don't need it. SLS is an amazingly effective cleanser, but so is SCS, sodium cocoa sulfate, and sodium cocoa sulfate does contain a portion of sodium lauryl sulfate, so I have found that it is an amazing cleanser, and I've never once been like, I need more cleansing power, you know, I need the SLS. From a safety standpoint, I don't have anything against SLS, but it can definitely be irritating. So in my personal life, I generally tend to sort of only really want it in things like a dishwashing detergent. A few years ago, I actually switched away from toothpastes that contained SLS because I suspected that they might be breaking me out. I'd seen some posts on Reddit's skincare addiction subreddit about that, and lo and behold, I stopped getting kind of pimples in my where you drool when you sleep. Sexy, I know. Another one is lip balm flavor oils, and that's honestly just because I find them to taste really kind of chemically and fake, and I just really don't enjoy it. I'm a much bigger fan of a lip balm that gets its center flavor from a bit of peppermint essential oil, or from the coconut oil and cocoa butter right in the lip balm. I do use fragrance oils though now, and I have for probably the last 18 months to 2 years, and I'm having a lot of fun playing with those. I shared a video a year or two ago kind of on essential oils and fragrance oils, and I will link to that in the description box below. I now avoid non-biodegradable glitter, especially in bath products, so things like soaps and bath bombs. So that's a bit of an opposite direction thing, but as you may know, and as I learned, non-biodegradable glitters are a type of microplastic, and we don't really need any more of those getting flushed down our drains. I still avoid palm oil, choosing to use lard or tallow in my soaps instead of palm oil as that hardening oil, but I do also recognize that palm oil is ubiquitous. It's very, very difficult to avoid completely. So I know that I'm not avoiding it completely, but I am trying to use more local alternatives where I can. Generally speaking, the more I learn about cosmetic ingredients, the less concerned I am about safety. There's always preference and things that work best for your skin, but as long as you are following the recommended usage amounts and the purposes of the product, I am not nearly as concerned about these sorts of things as I was when I first got started. If you want to learn more about this, I'll throw some helpful links in the description box below, but I do want to throw in a quick shout out for cosmeticsinfo.org, which is a wonderful database for learning about the ingredients that we use and is a much better alternative to the EWG Skin Deep database, which many of you might have already heard of. All right, I think that is it for this final Q&A video of this decade. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, and please make sure you are checking out the description box below for helpful links, further reading, and all kinds of fun things. But thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.